The card declined in front of my wife's father, my sister, and the man whose rent she had secretly paid. Lauren stared at the terminal, then at me, while the waiter quietly removed the check presenter from the table. "You froze our card?" she asked. I placed a folder beside her untouched glass and said, "I froze my account." What she didn't know was that the declined dinner bill wasn't the reason I had called everyone there, and the rent payment wasn't the only promise she had made using my money. 3 weeks earlier, I still thought my marriage was solid. My name is Daniel Price. I was 39 and worked as a construction project manager in Minneapolis. I wasn't flashy, but I was steady, organized, and probably too willing to solve problems before anyone asked. Lauren and I had been together for 8 years and married for 5. She worked in fundraising for a small arts nonprofit. She was warm, spontaneous, and the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday without checking a calendar. Our routine felt ordinary in the best way. I made coffee at 6. She stole the first cup, and I filled her car whenever the tank ran low. I trusted her because she had stood beside me through a layoff, and I never treated her lower salary like a lesser contribution. But our finances were uneven. I brought home about $6,700 a month. Lauren brought home around $3,100. We had separate personal accounts, plus a joint checking account for the household. I transferred $5,200 into it each month. She transferred $1,800. The credit card we called our card was actually an account I had opened 6 years before we married. Lauren was an authorized user. We used it for groceries, utilities, travel, and larger household purchases, then paid it from the joint account. That detail mattered later, but it wasn't a secret. We had agreed on it because my credit was better, the rewards were useful, and I already tracked the statements. I paid off $14,000 of Lauren's student loans, covered most moving costs, and delayed replacing my old truck to strengthen our emergency fund. I didn't resent it. I believed we were building one life. My weakness was confusing conflict avoidance with patience. If Lauren overspent or made plans without checking, I adjusted the budget. I told myself I was protecting the marriage from pointless tension. What I was really doing was teaching her that my boundaries could be negotiated afterward. The first sign came on a Sunday afternoon at her father Richard's house. He hosted a casual backyard cookout for Lauren's birthday, and about a dozen relatives and friends were there. That was where I saw Marcus Hale for the first time in nearly 4 years. Marcus had dated Lauren briefly in college. Their relationship ended long before I met her, and she had always described him as someone who became family. He had moved to Chicago, gotten married, and mostly disappeared from our lives. Now he was back in Minneapolis, recently separated and apparently struggling. Lauren introduced him like his presence required no explanation. "Marcus is helping with the fall donor event," she said. "His company might sponsor it." Marcus shook my hand and said, "Good to finally see you again, man." Again. That word bothered me, but I let it pass. For the next hour, Marcus and Lauren slipped into an old rhythm. They finished each other's stories, and every time I joined them, Lauren found a reason to talk to someone else. Near the end of the evening, Richard raised a glass and thanked everyone for coming. Marcus lifted his drink toward Lauren. "And extra thanks to this one," he said. "I'd be sleeping in my car without her." A few people laughed because they thought he was exaggerating. I didn't. Lauren's smile tightened. "Marcus, stop." "What?" he said. "You saved my apartment. That deserves a toast." I looked at her. "What does that mean?" She gave me the look she used when she wanted me to postpone a conversation until I was too tired to have it. "His rent was overdue," she said quietly. "There was an emergency." "How much?" "Daniel, not here." Marcus leaned against the patio table. "It was just enough to stop the eviction filing. I'm paying it back." I asked again, "How much?" Lauren exhaled. $1,800. The number hit me harder than I expected. Not because we couldn't survive it, but because she had spent it without asking and let me learn from him. "You used your personal account?" I asked. She looked away. That was the answer. "Our card?" I said. Richard stepped in. "Let's not turn a good night into an accounting meeting." Lauren's face hardened. "He had 48 hours, Daniel. I knew you'd make it a whole discussion." "It should have been a discussion. He was about to lose his apartment. And you thought that gave you permission to use our household card?" She lowered her voice, but everyone close to us could hear. "You're built to carry things," she said. "Marcus isn't. I knew you'd be fine." Someone near the grill gave an awkward laugh. Richard stared at the ground. Marcus said nothing. I felt my face get hot. Lauren must have seen it because she added, "Don't make this ugly. I was helping someone." I asked if she was sorry for hiding it. She crossed her arms. I'm sorry you found out like this. I'm not sorry I helped him. That distinction ended the party for me. I left without saying goodbye and sat in my truck with the engine off. You're built to carry things. It sounded almost like praise until I understood it. She believed I could absorb any weight she placed on me, so my consent was optional. I drove home slowly and slept in the guest room. At 2 in the morning, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself a question I hated. Was I angry because of the money, or because the man receiving it had once been in love with my wife? The honest answer was both. The next morning, Lauren acted irritated rather than ashamed. She stood in the guest room doorway and said, "Are you really doing this?" "Doing what?" "Punishing me with silence. I'm trying not to say something cruel." She rolled her eyes. "Marcus is paying us back. You're acting like I bought him a car." I asked when he would repay the $1,800. She paused. That pause was the first loose thread. "Soon," she said. "He's waiting on a commission." At work, my phone buzzed with a card notification. A charge for $4,860 had posted. The merchant name was North Loop Residential. I opened the card app. Lauren hadn't paid $1,800. She had paid 2 months of Marcus's rent, late fees, a court filing fee, and an online processing charge. Then I saw a small label under the transaction. Payment method saved. I called the property office and asked only whether a saved card could be charged again. The woman said, yes, if the tenant selects it or completes autopay. Rent was due in 3 days. I checked the household email account we both used for receipts and warranties. There was a message from the property portal because my email was tied to the card billing profile. The receipt listed Marcus's full balance. Under it was a line that read, "Autopay enrollment incomplete." Someone had tried. I went back through 6 months of statements. In April, there was a $950 charge to the same property company. Lauren had told me it was a deposit for the donor event venue. In June, there was a $620 charge to a storage facility. She had called it temporary storage for nonprofit supplies. Both explanations were false. The total I could prove was $6,430, and the next rent payment could push it past $8,000. That afternoon, I called the card issuer. I told them the charges had been made by an authorized user, so I wasn't reporting fraud. I asked them to lock the card, remove Lauren as an authorized user, issue a new number, and block recurring merchant tokens where possible. The representative warned me that valid posted charges would remain my responsibility. "I understand," I said. "I'm stopping new ones." Then I moved my paycheck back to my personal account. I left enough in the joint account for rent, utilities, insurance, groceries, and Lauren's normal personal transfer. I didn't empty anything. I didn't cancel the electricity. I didn't touch her salary. I just stopped giving her access to new credit in my name. When Lauren tried to buy groceries after work, the card failed. She called me before I reached home. "What did you do?" "I locked the card. You embarrassed me at the store. You used it to pay $4,860 after telling me it was $1,800. Silence. Then she said, "I was going to explain. When you were calmer. There are 2 earlier charges, $950 and $620. Her breathing changed. I said, "You told me one was an event deposit and one was storage. Marcus needed help moving, so you lied." I simplified it because you always turn money into a courtroom. I almost apologized. That was how trained I had become. Instead, I said, "You told me I was built to carry things. I'm choosing what I carry." She came home furious. She accused me of control, jealousy, and humiliation. Removing her from the card, she said, was economic abuse. I asked one question. "Did you try to enroll my card in his autopay?" She stopped pacing. "It didn't go through." That wasn't my question. He needed stability for a few months. How many months? "Daniel, you're missing the human part of this." "No, I'm finally seeing it." She packed a bag and went to Richard's house. By morning, 3 people had texted me. One said I had endangered Lauren by cutting off her access to food. Another said marriage meant shared money. Richard wrote, "Unlock the card for a week. We can talk when emotions settle." Lauren had told them I froze all our accounts. That wasn't true. I sent Richard a screenshot of the joint checking balance and the list of bills still funded. He didn't respond. Then Lauren posted a vague message online about discovering that generosity can threaten people who need control. She didn't name me, but mutual friends knew. Unfundish. I still wondered whether I had gone too far. Maybe I should have waited one night or insisted on counseling first. So I called my sister Elena. Elena loved me, but she had no patience for self-serving stories. Her first question was, "Did you ever tell Lauren she could help people with the card? Small things, meals, emergency rides, not thousands in rent. Did you freeze her own bank account? No. Did you leave enough for shared expenses? Yes. Are you angry because Marcus is an ex? Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Good," she said. "At least you're not pretending. Now prove the money problem would matter even if his name were Melissa." That irritated me, which meant it was useful. We spent Saturday reviewing statements and transfers. The pattern was worse than I thought. Over 7 months, Lauren had shifted $300 to $500 at a time from her personal contribution back into her own account, usually after I replenished the joint balance. The total was $2,200. On March 12th, she had texted me, "Can I reduce my joint transfer for a few months? The nonprofit cut reimbursements." I had said yes. Her nonprofit hadn't cut reimbursements. Her payroll deposits showed the same amount. The timing matched Marcus's return to Minneapolis. Then Marcus emailed me. The subject line was, "Please don't punish Lauren for helping me." He wrote that Lauren had promised temporary support while he restarted his sales career. He said he believed I had approved it because she repeatedly referred to our emergency fund. At the bottom, he attached screenshots of their messages. He meant them as proof she had acted openly. Instead, they showed planning. In one message, Marcus wrote, "Are you sure Daniel is okay with this?" Lauren replied, "He'll be annoyed, but he won't leave over money." In another, Marcus asked, "Should I call him?" She answered, "No, he makes everything formal. Let me handle him." The worst screenshot came from 2 days before the birthday cookout. Marcus wrote, "I can't take another month from you." Lauren replied, "It's not just from me. Daniel carries the heavy stuff. Once it's paid, he'll calm down." I read that sentence 3 times. She hadn't made a panicked decision during an emergency. She had calculated my reaction, used my aversion to conflict, and reassured Marcus that I would absorb the cost. Elena read the screenshots and leaned back. "Okay," she said, "this isn't charity. This is her volunteering your consent." That was the moment she changed sides. We made a timeline. April 6th, $950 to Marcus's property company. June 18th, $620 to storage. July 2nd through August 1st, $2,200 quietly removed from Lauren's household contributions. August 9th, $4,860 rent payment. August 12th, next rent due. The direct and diverted amount connected to Marcus was at least $8,630. We also owed a $7,500 roof repair deposit the following week. Paying the card and contractor together would leave less than 1 month of expenses. Lauren knew that. I sent her a simple message. "I need a written list of every payment or promise involving Marcus. I also need confirmation that my card information has been removed from his rent portal. Until then, finances stay separate." She replied, "I'm not submitting to an audit by my husband." An hour later, Richard called. He said Lauren wanted a family meeting. She believed I had weaponized money and damaged her reputation. I agreed, but I chose the location and asked Elena to attend. The meeting happened at a quiet restaurant with a private side room. Lauren arrived with Richard and Marcus. She said Marcus deserved to speak because I had dragged his name through our marriage. I hadn't contacted anyone except the bank, Elena, and Richard. Lauren started before the menus were opened. "Daniel froze my access to our money because I helped a friend avoid homelessness," she said. "He's now demanding records like I'm an employee." Richard nodded. Marcus looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. Lauren continued, "I understand I should have told him first. But his response has been cruel and disproportionate." At first, she controlled the room. Richard said, "A marriage can't survive if one person can shut down the other person's money." I replied, "I agree." Lauren blinked. I slid the first page across the table. "That's the joint checking account," I said. "Rent, utilities, insurance, groceries, and Lauren's personal transfer were never stopped. Her paycheck remained entirely hers." Richard read it. Lauren said, "That's not the point. It's the first point. I didn't freeze our shared cash. I froze a credit account in my name after an authorized user made undisclosed charges." Marcus leaned forward. "She said you knew." "I didn't." Lauren cut in. "You knew I was helping him. I knew after he thanked you in public. I placed the rent receipt beside the bank summary." "You told me $1,800, I said. The posted charge was $4,860. Richard looked at Lauren. She said, "That included fees." I didn't have the exact total in my head. I added the April and June statements. These were also for Marcus, $950 to his property company and $620 to his storage unit. Lauren told me they were nonprofit expenses. Lauren's face changed. Marcus looked at her. "You said the storage money came from your personal savings." She turned toward him. "It was temporary." Elena spoke for the first time. "Temporary doesn't mean invisible." Lauren snapped. "Why are you even here?" "Because Daniel asked me to challenge his version before he acted. I did. Then I saw the records." Richard rubbed his forehead. "Lauren, did you lie about the charges?" She avoided the question. Instead, she said, "Why is no one talking about the fact Marcus was facing eviction?" I said, "Because his eviction doesn't authorize you to use my credit card." "There it is," she said. "Your credit card, your money, your rules." "No. My account, our agreement, and no permission." The waiter entered with the check from the drinks and appetizers. Lauren grabbed the card from her wallet and handed it over, almost as if she wanted to prove something. A minute later, he returned. "I'm sorry," he said. "This card was declined." That was the moment from the beginning. Lauren stared at me. "You froze our card?" I put the folder beside her glass. "I froze my account." The waiter left with another card from Richard. Lauren lowered her voice. "You set this up to humiliate me." "No. You brought the canceled card after I told you it was locked." Marcus looked from her to me. "Canceled?" I opened the folder to the screenshots he had emailed. "You sent these to me," I said. His shoulders dropped. Lauren reached for the papers, but I kept my hand on them. I read the first line aloud. "He'll be annoyed, but he won't leave over money." Richard stopped moving. Then I read the second. "No, he makes everything formal. Let me handle him." Lauren said, "Private messages without context. The context is on the next page." I turned it. "Daniel carries the heavy stuff. Once it's paid, he'll calm down." No one spoke. Marcus finally said, "Lauren, you told me he agreed after the first payment." She looked at him with open anger. "You knew he'd be difficult. I asked to call him, and I handled it." That sentence did more damage than anything I had prepared. Richard pushed the receipts away. "You didn't handle it. You hid it." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed sharp. "So now everyone's against me because I helped someone." Elena shook her head. "No. We're against the lie that helping required Daniel's money and silence." Lauren turned to me. "Say what this is really about. You hate that Marcus mattered to me before you." I resisted the urge to defend myself. "My jealousy doesn't change a single transaction." She tried again. "You've always resented that I'm more generous than you. My generosity requires my consent." That's such a cold way to talk about marriage. It's a necessary way to talk about trust. Marcus stood up halfway, then sat again. He said, "For what it's worth, I wouldn't have accepted the last payment if I knew Daniel hadn't agreed." I looked at him. "You accepted the first two without speaking to me." He nodded once. "That's fair." Lauren glared at him. "You're seriously taking his side?" "I'm taking my name out of your marriage." She hadn't expected that. I slid one final page toward her. It was a written summary of what I had already told her. "Finances stay separate. The card is closed. I'll cover my share of the household obligations through the end of the month. I'm moving into a short-term apartment on Monday, and I want us to communicate through email until we meet with a counselor or mediator." Richard looked shocked. "You're moving out?" "For now." Lauren whispered, "Over rent?" I looked at the screenshots again. "No. Over the belief that I'd never force you to ask." She shook her head. "You're throwing away 8 years because I knew you could handle it." That was when I gave her the line I had been carrying for days. "You said I was built to carry things. I am, but I'm not carrying your promises anymore." I left the folder on the table and walked out. The separation didn't feel triumphant. I cried in my truck outside the furnished apartment and missed Lauren before I even unpacked. I missed our coffee routine and the marriage I had believed was real. For 6 weeks we attended counseling. Lauren admitted she lied, but she kept describing the payments as evidence of her compassion. She said Marcus had been emotionally fragile after his separation and that she felt responsible for keeping him stable. When the counselor asked why that responsibility belonged to our household, Lauren said, "Because Daniel could afford it." That answer never changed. Marcus removed my card information from the rent portal and moved into a cheaper apartment with a roommate. Over the next 4 months, he repaid $1,500. I didn't chase him beyond the written repayment plan because my real issue was never collecting every dollar from him. Lauren's father apologized to me for repeating the financial abuse accusation without checking. He also stopped funding Lauren's version of events. That mattered because she had expected family pressure to push me back into place. The roof repair was delayed by 5 weeks. I paid the card balance to avoid interest, and our mediation agreement assigned Lauren responsibility for $4,000 of the debt. She repaid it through monthly transfers after we filed for divorce. The divorce itself was quiet. There was no courtroom victory. We divided what we had and spent too much on attorneys. The hardest consequence was accepting that love had existed alongside entitlement. Lauren had loved me, I believed that. But she had also turned my reliability into a resource she could spend without permission. My part was painful to admit. For years I solved every problem after the fact. I thought that made me dependable. Sometimes it made honesty unnecessary. Freezing the card didn't save my marriage. It stopped one payment method and exposed a much older pattern. The real boundary was refusing to keep financing decisions I was never allowed to make. So, was I wrong for freezing the joint card after my wife paid another man's overdue rent? Or should I have given her one final chance before separating our finances? Share your judgment in the comments and subscribe for more original stories.